This is actually quite a good process, as it makes you reconsider which ones you use a lot and where they should be positioned, a bit like doing a spring clean. So first impressions of the G5 against the G4? Well, actually tricky, because I may be one of the very few that like the buttons on the rear of the case on the G4, and I use these for volume settings, so I immediately missed these. My G4 also had the black leather back that made it stand out from other smartphones, so I was going to miss both of these. The charger has moved to a USB-C, which is the best for the long run, but just means I have to replace a lot of cables in the car, office and at home. And one of my smaller power banks that I used to carry has a micro USB cable attached, so it is now redundant. It is genuinely something to consider if you have other family members using micro USB, as where you used to share charging solutions, I now have to have my own. However, in the long term, it should be a good move. I just need to upgrade my wife's and son's phones to be compatible. The premium design, however, is good, albeit very similar in looks to most modern smartphones. The fingerprint sensor is a welcome addition that will allow easier yet more secure access to the phone, especially as I've recently added and loaded Android Pay. The password button also acts as the power on button, which again I feel is an improvement. The interchangeable base is a real differentiator, which allows you to remove the base, to replace the battery and swap other accessories, or friends as LG would like us to refer to them. I will review these in details at a later date, but my impressions of these have been positive, with the Cam Plus being the one that very likely I will want to carry with me, as it makes taking photos on the G5 easier and boosts the battery as well. Once fitted, whilst making the G5 slightly bulky, it's ergonomically better when you want to take photos, and the zoom dial much easier to use than the on-screen control. This brings me on to the new features of the camera. With the dual module camera, this does make a noticeable difference in the field of view, and I've been very impressed with its ability and range of features. With the camera in manual mode, you can simply select between standard view and wide angle using the two lenses. The results are very impressive, and it works well on both indoor and outdoor shots. I took some new shots from inside my house, and the difference in field of view is very noticeable with a far greater aspect. The key for me and most others will be that it will take an excellent shot in auto mode, but when the mood takes you and you want to capture that unusual or special shot, then the range of modes and features will give you great opportunities to do so, which includes using the two lens for special effects, using both front and rear camera at the same time to create a multi-view, and a large number of others including slow-mo, panoramic, self-timer, together with a number of colour effects. The camera and its features are therefore a very positive upgrade. Memory is larger than my G4, and I took my 32 micro SD card across with me, and thus a large number of my photos and music. First impressions on speed are very good, with no noticeable lag on any features so far. You can access the SIM and micro SD slot from the side by pressing a pin into the side, which releases the tray. A simple task, and in fact an improvement over the G4, where you had to remove both the back and the battery to achieve this. Volume buttons have moved to a more traditional place on the side of the G5, which, as I mentioned, will not worry most, but I personally miss the back on the G4. Screen clarity and resolution seem excellent, and it appears to be slightly easier to read in sunlight, although as before, on other devices, beware if you use polarized sunglasses, as they can greatly impair the resolution depending on the aspect of view. It's curious that on the G4 this caused me issues in landscape mode, but on the G5 it's worse in portrait. I am sure someone with more knowledge could bore you with the reasons, but given that I turn my phone into landscape to take pictures, this is an improvement for me. Making calls and overall sound quality is good, with perhaps some attention needed to the microphone position, which is at the base, as a few have said my voice is muffled, but I believe this is simply the way I was holding the G5 at the time. The battery life appears on a par with the G4, and the fast charge is therefore a welcome addition, and one that I will find useful, in that in the office I can put it on charge for perhaps 20 minutes and have enough additional charge to get me through the day if needed. It will just about take me through a day, but if I was away from power, I would still have a power bank with me if I thought I was going to be away from a charging solution for any length of time. This has been my first smartphone review for a while, and it's indeed interesting that when you now look to do such reviews and comparisons, The level of change is much more in slight improvements rather than groundbreaking changes, irrespective of what the manufacturer's marketing team would like you to believe. In summary, therefore, the G5 is a good improvement over the G4, and I believe is a strong contender as one of the best smartphones on the market at this stage. The addition of the Friends is an innovative step, and I hope third parties are encouraged to develop others in the near future. I like the additional camera features, better processor and extra RAM, which seems to make it quicker, faster charging and fingerprint sensor as the main improvements. I think the Cam Plus will stay with me and get used, so it gets to stay as my current smartphone. Praise indeed.
The moral of the story here is that G5 didn't live up to the modular phone hype, but that doesn't mean it's a bad phone. It's actually a really good phone that suffers from one major flaw. It was released after the Galaxy S7. That was nearly 6 months ago. Now I'm using the G5 again. In my original review, I gave the G5 a pretty mediocre score. It ended up grading worse than all the other major flagship phones to launch this year. After using the phone for a second time, I think my original review may have been a little unfair. Let's take a second look. So what didn't I like about it the first time? My conclusion was basically that the G5 is a less premium version of the Galaxy S7, or as I put it, a ice cream sundae with fewer toppings and lower quality ingredients. That's still mostly true. The G5 is definitely not on par with the Galaxy S7's build quality, but it's not all bad either. I actually really like how lightweight the G5 is. It feels really good in your pocket, and the painted metal, still not as nice as real unpainted metal, but I will take this any day over glossy fingerprint magnet glass. As far as toppings go, the G5 definitely doesn't have as many features as the Galaxy S7, but I'm not actually sure why I dinged the G5 for that. I don't use half of the features on Samsung phones. They just feel bloated and kind of overly complex. It's nice to have options, but I prefer simplicity. Software is one of the most important things when it comes to the longevity of a phone. Samsung phones feel great out of the box, but eventually all those toppings kind of go bad and it gets laggy and slow. LG's UX may not have all the glitz and glam, but it's lightweight and it's smooth. Battery life was another thing that I didn't like so much, and that really hasn't changed. The G5 is very average. It's right there with the Galaxy S7 and HTC 10. Obviously, I would like it to be better, but it's not so bad that it's a deal breaker. So what about all the things that I did like the first time? The display is still great. I would prefer AMOLED, but that's just a personal preference. It looks amazing. The fingerprint scanner is still one of the best, but I think HTC's is slightly faster and more reliable. The camera is still exceptional. Probably one of the most underrated smartphone cameras out there. It's right on the same level as Samsung phones. The wide-angle camera is still really cool, but I always feel like I forget to use it until after I've already taken the photo. So if you can remember to use it, it's really cool. The modular design is a thing. It's there. I said in my original review that I was willing to bet that most people would never even slide out the battery, and that has certainly been the case in my experience. In real life use, I wouldn't even call this a modular phone. It's really just a phone with a removable battery, which isn't all that exciting. There are just no accessories for this phone. There's not even a battery case, which seems like a really obvious thing to make for this. So you're really just better off pretending that the modular aspects of this phone don't even exist and just use it regularly. Now that I've had a second look at this phone, I really think it's one of the most underrated Android phones of this year. It was kind of overshadowed by the Samsung phones and HTC 10, but those phones are not considerably better than the G5 in any one area. It seems like the G5 just kind of got lost in the mix as just another Android phone. But the real question is, would I recommend buying it almost 6 months after it released? Obviously, if you're interested in the Pixel phones, wait a little bit longer and see what those are. But if you're into something like from Samsung, LG, Motorola, the G5 is easily worth a look and probably still a good buy. Thanks for watching, everyone. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to the Fandroid channel for more. We'll see you next time.
Hey, what's good guys, EasyTech231 here. So I've been using the LG G5 as my daily driver for a few weeks, and I've treated it just like I treat any of my other phones, and now I'm finally ready to share with you guys my true thoughts on this device. Also, shout out to LG for providing me with this G5 for review purposes, and all of my opinions on the G5 are 100% genuine and honest. Alright, so living with the G5. Well, I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat this review. The G5 is a good phone. Despite what a lot of other people will tell you, on its own, the G5 is a good device. Now, when you start comparing it to all of the other flagships out there right now, you get quite the different story. Now, for starters, there's the hardware, and there's a lot of controversy surrounding this very subject. I put this phone into the hands of a bunch of different people, asking them if it was made of metal or plastic, and they all said it was plastic. Well, the phone is actually made out of metal, but LG decided to put it through their microdizing process where they pretty much coat it with primer. LG has their reasons behind this, and I'm not going to get into all of that right now, but if you're interested in why they did that, I'll link LG's statement on this subject in the description. But basically, the main benefit to you guys would be that this allows for the phone to be less slippery in the hand. Bottom line, I didn't whine too much about the materials LG used because at the end of the day, I'm either slapping a skin or a case on my phone. It's that simple. But that's just me. Now, if you're one of those people that actually really likes to use their phones butt naked, then don't expect it to feel like a premium and high quality flagship device. Now, as far as aesthetics go, I don't think the G5 is winning any awards here. It's just not an attractive device, and especially when comparing it to the Nexus 6P, for example. Comparisons aside, this phone did not wow me with its looks, but I don't think it was meant to. I'm pretty certain that looks was not LG's main focus this year, and with the G5 it's pretty easy to see that they went for functionality over a flashy fit and finish. And to be honest, I can't really blame them for that, but when you're in the market where consumers will nitpick and complain about every little detail, you really have to choose what you're going for very carefully. Now, as a person who's been spoiled by larger phones like the Nexus 6P, the Note 5, and even the iPhone 6s Plus, I wasn't too big of a fan of the LG G5's size. Of course, that's not a problem with the phone itself, it's just a personal preference, and the same thing goes for the S7 Edge. There are things to note like LG's decision to put the volume rocker back on the side after a few attempts at keeping it on the back, so I do like that. But of course, they did keep the power button on the back, and it did take me a little while to get used to that, but over time I actually found myself using the double tap to wake feature instead. And speaking of that power button, overall, not a fan. The placement itself is one thing, and like I said, I did get used to it, but it's just not a solid button at all. It feels uneven, and it just doesn't give me a nice, solid, reassuring click that I'd normally expect. And of course, that home button is home to the fingerprint reader, which is nice. It's fast and accurate, so nothing wrong there. There's also the bottom firing speaker, which really sounds nice. I was pleasantly surprised with that. It's full, and it gets pretty loud too. It sounds much better than the S7 Edge's speaker, that's for sure. And of course, there's USB Type-C, which I'm still getting used to. There's also LG's skin on top of Android, which really, to be honest, is not that bad at all. I really do like the decent amount of home screen settings, like the ability to adjust the grid size, the transition animations, and you can also hide applications, which is very important since there's no app drawer out of the box. But I do believe LG issued an update where you can enable an app drawer, so there's that. There's the always on display, which is nice, but I didn't really use it at all, and just the little things about the stock experience that I really liked. Attention to detail. Now, as time went on, some of the downsides that I previously mentioned sort of just disappeared as I got used to them. I aim to use a device and review it as is, and I try not to complain too much about what it lacks. So the G5 handled everyday uses like a boss. In fact, where I'd normally get slight stutters and hiccups on my other devices, the G5 acted like those things don't even exist. Everything ran beautifully to the point where I obviously had to mention it in this video. Of course, performance wasn't perfect, but everything that I threw at it, from browsing the web and social media, taking and editing pictures and videos, playing games, and all that good stuff, it handled it better than some of my other devices, so I was very impressed with that. And battery life was nothing to sneeze at either. With that 2800 mAh battery, I do wish it was slightly better, but I was easily able to make it through a full day's use. I was also pleased with the video and picture quality. Some people say that the picture quality is better than the S7 and the iPhone 6s Plus. Some people say the opposite. I'm sort of on the fence with this one, but it's definitely comparable to, if not right on par, with some of the other flagships. I do feel like it depends on the types of pictures you take, and I was especially impressed with the phone's wide angle capability. I mean, just look at that. I love it. I also love the fact that they brought back the micro SD card slot, because if you're like me, you store a lot of pictures and videos on your phone, then this is definitely one to consider. And of course, there are LG's friends, which is pretty much the main selling point of this phone. The fact that you can rip out the bottom here and replace the battery, you can tack on a camera module or even a DAC for better audio. This brings a whole new feature set to the smartphone game, and unfortunately I wasn't really able to get my hands on any of these modules, so I can't exactly touch on them as far as personal experience goes, but from what I've seen and from what I've heard, they're pretty underwhelming. And that's really a shame, seeing as how this is a bold move by LG, and I really hope to see something great. It's really just a matter of execution, and I'm not too sure that LG did that the right way. Overall, I really did enjoy using the LG G5, and to be completely honest, it's not nearly as bad as some people are making it out to be. But because of all of the hype that was surrounding it and how amazing LG made it sound, we really expected to get more than what we actually got, and some of those naysayers really started to make sense. The G5 is a solid device, and in terms of specifications, what else could you possibly ask for? On paper, it really should be one of the best phones out right now, but if what's on paper doesn't fully translate into the overall user satisfaction, then you can really forget what's listed on that spec sheet. I like the G5, but I can't choose it over my 6P, my S7 Edge, Note 5, or even my iPhone 6s Plus for that matter. I feel like LG is moving in the right direction. They just slipped up a little bit with the G5. They'll be back next time, and I really look forward to what they have to offer. But anyway, those are my thoughts on the LG G5. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to slap that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks for watching.
This video is sponsored by Amazon. 10 facts about the Amazon App Store. Fact number 3, you can use Amazon coins to buy apps and in-game items in the Amazon App Store. Simply by purchasing Amazon coins, you can save up to 10% on apps, games, and in-app items. And the more you buy, the larger the discount. Amazon even has promotions running from time to time where you can get savings greater than 10%, so that is also a great option. So for example, you can buy 10,000 Amazon coins, which is $100 worth of coins for only $90, which is a $10 savings. 100 coins are worth $1. You can visit the link in the description to learn all about Amazon coins and to buy some Amazon coins of your own. The LG G5 has been on the market for about 2 months, give or take, so how does it compare to the other flagships on the market, such as the HTC 10 and or Galaxy S7? The build is certainly a step up from last year's LG G4. It features a modular metal build construction, but it's still not quite up to par with the S7 or the HTC 10 in this regard. Mostly because LG decided to coat the metal backplate with a plastic paint that actually diminishes the premium feel by a noticeable degree. Now, the metal frame is nice, and paired with the metal backplate, it helps to add some integrity to the phone. There's very little flex. The phone is extremely slippery, so you're probably going to want to slap on a slick wraps or D-brand skin. I don't like how LG removed the rear-facing volume button, but I do like the inclusion of a micro SD card slot and a modular slot that can be removed to swap batteries and add various camera and audio-related accessories. That's something you don't see from the competition, and that's a huge win. I think the 5.3-inch display size of the G5 offers the best experience for most users, as it's not too big, nor is it too small. The QHD resolution is nothing to complain about. The panel gets extremely bright, brighter than much of the competition, but color accuracy isn't quite as good as the HTC 10. However, it's certainly better than AMOLED panels. It too features an always-on display feature that displays various news and notifications. It won't drain the battery life by much thanks to the separated backlight, and you don't have to worry about burn-ins since it's an IPS panel. The home launcher on the G5 has received some negative feedback because it features no app drawer, so all of your apps are displayed on the home screens. There is a quote-unquote smart bulletin that can give you health, calendar, and music-related info, which you can turn off. It's super basic. I don't have any issues with it as I've been using the Google Now launcher mostly. Plus, every other aspect of the phone resembles stock Android. The skin LG is running is very flat and simple, nothing too obtrusive. And after using the G5 on and off for the past couple of months, I can confidently say it feels like the fastest smartphone I own. I haven't crunched the numbers in detail, but it performs extremely well. Geekbench 3 gives it a single core score of about 2300 and a multi-core score of about 5300. The G5 performs unlike any other LG flagship, though that's not to say previous LG flagships were slow, but the G5 feels much less clunky and bogged down. It's apparent that LG spent some time on the software, and in my opinion, I think it's still for the better, even if the launcher isn't that great. The G5 does feature a 16 megapixel camera sensor with optical image stabilization, a laser autofocus, and f1.8 aperture. What's neat is that it also features a wide-angle 8 megapixel sensor, but with an f2.4 aperture. If you want to capture detailed images or images where lighting is an issue, then you'll definitely want to use the main 16 megapixel shooter. But to capture wide-angle shots of nature or buildings, you'll want to use the 8 megapixel wide sensor that can give you the depth and the magnitude that just you can't find from the standard shooter. It's certainly an interesting idea to include 2 sensors on the rear, but it's unique and it certainly doesn't hurt the experience. If you compare the 16 megapixel sensor with other sensors from Samsung, HTC, it competes very well, and it's definitely one of the top sensors out there on the market. The speakers are bottom facing. They produce a sound quality somewhere between the Galaxy S7 and HTC 10. The bass is surprisingly punchy for a bottom facing smartphone speaker, and audio doesn't sound too distorted at loud volumes when compared to the S7, which has an abysmal speaker. I would still prefer front facing speakers, naturally. The G5 features a removable 2800 mAh battery, one of the only flagships of the last couple of years to feature a removable battery, but with its 2800 milliamps, the battery life isn't great, nor is it as good as its predecessor. You can get a little more than 5 hours of screen on time if you do nothing but browse the internet on Wi-Fi, but the LTE data and high accuracy location settings and various other apps you may have installed on here, most people are going to get right around 3 to 4 hours of screen on time. I will say, standby time is very good, only dropping a percentage point or 2 overnight. 2 months later, and the LG G5 is still one of the most unique smartphones on the market. If you value the modular slot found in the G5 that allows you to replace the battery and add various accessories, or if you value an IR blaster or wide-angle camera sensor, I think the LG G5 is a no-brainer and will make for a great daily driver. But if you're looking for the most well-rounded smartphone, you're probably going to want to look elsewhere. I do want to thank AT&T for sending this unit out to me for review. AT&T is offering a promo that ends very soon. If you buy a new LG G5 with AT&T Next, you can receive an LG G Watch Urbane for $100 or G Pad X 10.1 for $50. Links below if you are interested. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this review of the LG G5 2 months after its release. If you did, I appreciate a thumbs up, and I look forward to seeing you in the next PhoneDog video. As always, I'm BoHD from PhoneDog.com. I will see you in the next one. See ya.
Alright guys, LG G5, the latest in the G series from LG. This is going to be an honest look, a fanboy free review, an unbiased review of this sexy new phone from the guys at LG, so stay tuned. Alright, so jumping right in, I'm going to have to say right off the bat here that I absolutely love this phone. If you're a fan of my videos, you know how much I love the LG Nexus 5X, and the G5 is kind of a very, very similar phone to it, and I'll get into the details of that in a second, but LG just has a unique style and a unique design and unique features that I think are really, really great in this phone. But first we're going to talk about the hardware and the build of the phone, and then we'll get into the details of it, and primarily compare it to the Nexus 5X, which is probably my favorite phone to date right now. So go ahead, jumping in. We have a 5.3 inch Quad HD display, really, really beautiful, great saturation, great color accuracy, not as saturated as you'd find in like a Galaxy S7 or a Galaxy S7 Edge. But if you look at this compared to a Nexus 5X, which has an LCD display, you can tell that the saturation is a lot, I would say, better on the G5 than it is on the Nexus 5X, and you can kind of see the difference there between the two of them. It's very, very subtle, but it's noticeable. It's noticeably sharper, noticeably crisper, noticeably more color filled here on the G5. And another thing to talk about in regards to the screen and just the body itself is the top of the phone has this really great curve to it. You can kind of see it a little bit in the photo. You can definitely notice it when you hold the phone. It reminds me a little bit of a Dell Streak. Dell had kind of a curved slope top to their original 5-inch Streak phone back, gosh, that was probably 2010. And anyway, getting away from that, but the curve there is nice. Some people have complained that it makes adding a screen protector a little bit more difficult, which I can see how that would be a problem, but that is a nice feature to have. Body-wise, we've got an aluminum case on the phone. It feels premium. It doesn't have any creaks or cracks like the old Samsung phones have. It does feel better than polycarbonate. I'm not going to say it's a night and day difference than polycarbonate, but it does have a nice metal feel to it. You got that little aluminum sort of shiny chrome ring around the edge, makes the phone stand out a bit. Dual camera lenses here in the back. We have one for everyday shooting and a wide angle lens for wide angle photography. We'll talk about that later. Fingerprint sensor, as well as a home button, or excuse me, as well as a power button. The button here actually presses in, unlike the button on the 5X or the 6P, where it's just the fingerprint sensor. This acts as your power button and your fingerprint sensor, so it has a give to it, kind of like an iPhone home button there. Very, very small G5 branding right there. Very small LG branding on the front. We have a volume rocker here on the side. We have a 3.5mm headphone jack on the top. We have removable storage, which is great on the side here. So micro SD as well as nano SIM on the side. What other features do we have here? USB-C, which is great. That's that reversible plug. Speaker here on the bottom, single speaker. Has a lot of good sound to it. The sound quality is better than the 5X, but it's not as great as the old HTC Boom sound with dual stereo, but the quality of the speaker is quite nice. What's probably the biggest feature of this phone, or the biggest selling point for LG anyway, is the modularity, if that's a word, or modular components of the phone. And you can see this little dimple right here. Right, and first of all, the phone doesn't really creak or give. It's very, very solid, but as soon as you press in this little button, right, just like that, and then pull on the bottom, you can see that the phone opens up and now your battery is exposed. And so you can actually get, separate batteries for the phone if you're running out of charge, and replace the battery in the phone that way. So you can have a fully charged battery that's ready to go. The other cool thing is LG has developed some standalone modular components to this. You can slide in a camera module that allows you to have a better grip on the phone, a dedicated shutter button with a zoom control. Kind of a neat feature to have. I'm not 100% sold on the utility of this. I feel like if you're going to carry around extra stuff, you might as well just carry an extra battery bank, and plug in your phone that way. I give LG a lot of credit for doing something different, than other people are doing these days. I think it's great that they've gone ahead and incorporated this modular design to it. I don't necessarily know if it's worth it. I'd rather have a waterproof phone personally than I would have a modular component to it. I'm not going to buy that camera grip thing. I'm just going to use the phone as a regular camera. So it may work for some people, but for me, I think it's kind of a gimmick. Again, got to give LG credit for doing something different, but for me, it's not very useful. All right, let's talk about the camera. The camera is probably one of the nicest things about this phone. I know it's passed a lot of tests on DxOMark and some other camera review sites, but the camera is just amazing in this phone. Not only do you get two lenses on the back, right? And what I was saying earlier is that you get a wide angle lens and a standard lens. You can control that from the camera app, and so you can see here if I press on that, right, that it goes to the normal lens. And if I press on that, it goes to the wide angle lens. One of the downsides though to the wide angle lens is the sensor is only 8 megapixels, whereas the primary camera I think is 16 megapixels. So you get a little bit nicer image quality out of the 16 megapixel sensor than you do the 8 megapixel sensor. But that wide angle lens is just fun to play with. If you guys have ever gotten into photography or like photography, wide angle photography is super, super fun. The other thing that's great about the camera is that it has a couple different modes. It has manual mode, which allows you to change all these different settings. You have an ISO setting, you have an exposure setting, you have a shutter speed setting, you have an auto slider lock, white balance settings you can adjust here on the slider. Really, really easy to use, really, really fun to play around with. And then you can go back, just simple mode where it's basically you just press on the screen and boom, it takes a picture for you. As far as quality goes, the quality of the camera is really great. I would say that it compares easily to my Nexus 5X, which I definitely like, and it allows people to customize their their shooting experience using that module, but a great all-in-all camera. I would say that the camera is probably one of the best features of this phone, other than the screen. The screen and the camera are probably the two things that I like most in the G5. Other things to talk about with the camera: you do have external storage, so that makes it nice for storing lots of videos and photos on it, whereas the Nexus 5X does not have any external storage, and so you're limited to the internal storage. So if you want to go out and do a lot of shooting, you're going to be limited there, whereas you can dedicate a whole SD card inside this guy. All right, let's jump into the software and some of the other features that make this phone great. First of all, you can see the always-on display here shown in the top. This is customizable, configurable, much like Samsung has on the S7. It is going to use battery power, which is a downside to having the always-on display. But it's nice to be able to see the clock without powering on your phone. You can add your signature there as well. Another nice thing is the fingerprint scanner in the back here, very quick, very accurate, works almost every time you use it. Nice and quick to unlock the phone. Getting into the software here, I've got the Google Now launcher on top of the stock LG launcher. I prefer the Google Now launcher just because of its simplicity and its easy access to apps in an app drawer. The LG skin on top of this is a little bit annoying. There's a lot of bells and whistles and gimmicks to the LG skin, which I'm not a real huge fan of. It's okay. It's very, very Samsung-y in terms of all the features and gimmicks that it uses. It does have some nice stuff to it, but for me, it's a little bit much. I prefer stock Android, you guys know that. But it does have some nice things like, font adjustments and bold text, and it has, screen, daydream, and it just has a lot of stuff in there that, you'll have to go through and play with when you get the phone. But it has a lot to it. There's a lot of sort of, not bugs, but features. Along that same line, there's also a lot of there's also a lot of LG bloatware in this phone. And most of it can be disabled or, removed. But, it's just frustrating. It's frustrating to see things like LG Smart World, and where's another one we can look at? There's just so many, like this cat thing, like LG Friends. I just don't need that stuff, guys. Like, I don't know if anybody uses that. And it's annoying to have it in there and polluting your app, and phone experience. But we'll get to the good stuff about the software. The phone is super, super fast and feels really fast in your hand, and it's nice to be able to have a phone that doesn't have lag, it doesn't have slowdowns and hiccups. Finally, Android's getting pretty polished and developed with its app, running and software loading, and things tend to seem great with how fast and how great the phone feels in your hand from a user experience standpoint. I will make one comment, though, that it doesn't appear to be incredibly faster than what you would see, again, on my favorite phone here, the Nexus 5X. We'll go ahead and make sure everything's closed on here, we'll close everything on here, and then we'll open up the same app here at the same time. So we'll just go ahead and open Twitter and just show you guys what I'm talking about. So, nice and quick on the LG, a little bit slower on the 5X. You can get an idea of the speed there between the two. We'll go ahead and open another one here. Let's open up Google Plus side by side, see what happens. So faster on the LG, on the G5 rather than the 5X. And we'll go ahead and open a game here. There's Stickman and Push Those at the same time. To give you an idea of just how fast the G5 is compared to the the older Nexus 5X, and so noticeably faster here, right, than on the 5X. And so if that's something that's important to you, if you want the fastest of the fast, the processor in here, the Snapdragon 820 is 4 gigs of RAM, is really, really great. But the 5X isn't that far behind. Granted, it is an older phone. Granted, the specs are a little bit lower, but it does keep up. So getting to sort of my point with the software, super fast, super great, but it does have some bloatware, and it does have the LG skin, which for me isn't so great. I prefer stock Android. And along those same lines with stock Android, you can see a very huge difference here between these two phones. This is running Android N, which is going to be the next version of Android. This is still running Android Marshmallow, which is the current version of Android. And that's fine from probably 75% of the world. 25% of us geeks might want the latest and greatest software right away. But it does lend a point about updates and update frequency and update speed. The Nexus series of phones is going to get the updates right away, immediately from Google, and be the first out with the update when it's ready. LG, I'm not 100% sure, if they have an update timeline for Android N or what their update timeline is typically like. But if history serves as any indicator, these phones, these being sort of LG,